What can we learn by reflecting on the Platonic Dialogue on Phaedrus on love? How do carnal love and divine love differ? Can romantic love also be divine? The lover of Phaedrus asked the timeless question, which in the modern world can be restated. Should we enjoy our women in the same manner as we enjoy our beer? And how comparable is homosexual love to the love between a man and a woman? Please, we welcome interesting questions in the comments. Let us learn and reflect together. At the end of our talk, we'll discuss the sources used for this video. Please feel free to follow along in the PowerPoint script we uploaded to SlideShare. There is a running joke in the earlier Socratic dialogues of Plato's that scholars often miss. Although Socrates proclaims that the unexamined life is not worth living, the running joke is that very few people care about spending time examining their lives, and they live imperfect lives according to a moral code they construct on the fly that suits their desires. Socrates constantly confronts people in the marketplace asking questions about important topics like, what is justice? Which in modern terms can be recast as, do you really love your neighbor? Socrates then angers them when they reveal that they are not really living under a coherent moral code, but rather are living under rules they have cobbled together from vague impressions. His student Phaedrus is an exception. He is eager to engage in Socratic dialogue, and he is eager to learn wisdom from Socrates. This Platonic dialogue is both about love and how we can benefit from examining our lives by reflecting on moral philosophy. Plato's dialogues on love, the Symposium and the Phaedrus, are both among his classic dialogues. The Symposium was a dinner party where the guests were too hungover from the night before and plan a quieter evening giving speeches on love. The guests first offer a series of speeches on romantic love or carnal love, and the capstone speech is a final speech by Socrates on divine love. This speech is a Socratic dialogue within a Socratic dialogue and tells of his conversation with his beloved Diotima as she teaches him about divine love, leaving us to wonder, does Diotima have a touch of the divine herself? Both the Symposium and the Phaedrus reflect the Greek culture that elevates both married love between a husband and wife and homosexual love, although the ancients would have regarded the concept of homosexual marriage as simply absurd, as the purpose of marriage in the ancient world was to raise children who would keep the family name alive, as well as take care of you when you're older. Also, in ancient Greece, men delayed marriage until they were established at about age 30, whereas women married young in their teens. And since women were not often educated, this meant that men did not see their young wives as their equals. And there were exceptions. The most notable was the wife of Pericles, Aspasia. Although Socrates does not condemn homosexual love in either dialogue, he is also depicted as being above carnal love, only capable of a philosophical divine love that is only concerned with the goodness of the soul. In the Symposium, the rowdy Alcibiades crashes the dinner party quite drunk, proclaiming how though he and Socrates were the best of friends, even saving each other's life in the thick of battle, in the end Socrates refused to become his lover. However, Socrates in the Phaedrus does appear to condone pederasty, the ancient man-boy love where an older man pursues a young nubile teenaged boy. This was condoned by many ancient Greeks as a rite of passage. We read how many of such couples turned into close friendships when the teenager becomes a man and the lust subsides in the relationship. And this practice was seen objectionable by many Greeks over time, and the possible manipulativeness of this relationship is likely why the Roman Stoics, then the early Christians, objected to this one-sided relationship. Both Judaism and Christianity forbid male homosexuality of any sort. We wish to point out that the main reason why so many of Plato's dialogues have been preserved is that Christian monks found them worthy to copy to preserve them for posterity, and the number of manuscripts preserved are second only to the scriptures. Socrates declines to condemn a practice so deeply embedded into Greek culture, but he does condemn predatory relationships. And definitely we can allegorize this dialogue to apply to heterosexual relationships. There is another difference between the Phaedrus and the Symposium. The speeches by the dinner guests in the Symposium all give speeches on imperfect romantic or carnal love, but we can learn moral lessons and be entertained by listening to these speeches. But in the Phaedrus, the first speech is by Lysias, who seeks to seduce Phaedrus with a morally and rhetorically defective speech, since often morally defective propositions cannot withstand logical attacks. And in the second speech of the Phaedrus, Socrates confirms this, and the result is Socrates carefully uncovering these defects, which means that these first two speeches do not teach us as many moral lessons, and are really lessons in proper rhetoric, and are thus harder to follow than the related speeches in the Symposium. So you may wish to view the second part with Socrates' speech on divine love first, if you primarily wish to learn the moral lessons. Now on with the Phaedrus. In the Platonic Dialogue we are now pondering, Phaedrus is discussing a speech whereby his male friend Lysias is trying to seduce him, or as we would say, grooming him, with a logically faulty speech that claims that the non-lover is a better lover than the lover who cares about you. And this is eerily similar to the modern frat boy notion that women should just be like beer. After all, a bottle of beer is never jealous if we drink another brand of beer. Why shouldn't women likewise be free of this jealousy? And Phaedrus meets up with Socrates and invites him to walk with him in the countryside outside the city walls. Socrates is a man of the city. He rarely ventures out into the country, but these friends prefer a pastoral setting to talk about love. To give a quick summary of the dialogue, Socrates notices the speech tucked into the cloak of Phaedrus and insists that he read it out loud, which is the first speech in the dialogue. Socrates disagrees both with the content of the speech as well as with its rhetorical construction. But as Phaedrus is impressed with his speech, he offers to try to salvage the speech if he can. But he only succeeds in constructing a better but still imperfect speech on carnal love rather than divine love. But then the daimon of Socrates whispers in his ear, objecting to the impiety of this speech, insisting that he immediately right the wrong done to the soul of Phaedrus by delivering a proper speech on divine love, which is the third speech of the dialogue. So going back to the first speech of the dialogue, Lysias argues that the non-lover, someone who seeks to use you for their pleasure, is actually superior to the lover, or someone who genuinely cares for you and does not wish to hurt you. So Phaedrus starts, "My tale, Socrates, is one of your sort. For love was the theme which occupied us, love after a fashion. Lysias has been writing about a fair youth who's being tempted, not by a lover. And this was the point. He ingeniously proved that the non-lover should be accepted rather than the lover." And Phaedrus continues reading the speech. "Non-lovers are preferable because lovers repent of their kindness which they have shown when their passion ceases. But to the non-lovers who are free and not under any compulsion, no time of repentance ever comes, for they confer their benefits according to the measure of their ability in the way which is most conducive to their own interest." He's actually arguing that selfishness is to be preferred. Perhaps Lysias is suggesting that everyone is actually a non-lover, that nobody cares. Then again, lovers consider how by reason of their love they have neglected their own concerns and rendered service to others. And when to these benefits conferred they add on the troubles which they have endured, they think that they have long ago made to the beloved a very ample return. But the non-lover has no such tormenting recollections. He has never neglected his affairs or quarreled with his relations. He has no troubles to add up or excuses to invent. Being well rid of these evils, why should he not freely do what will gratify the beloved? And if you say the lover is more to be esteemed because his love is thought to be greater, for he is willing to say and do what is hateful to other men in order to please his beloved, that, if true, is only a proof that he will only prefer any future love to his present, and will injure his old love at the pleasure of the new. So Lysias is accusing lovers as behaving like non-lovers, which makes no sense, since their behavior is what distinguishes them. Then Lysias argues that the non-lovers are preferable because they far outnumber those who are truly lovers, those who truly care. He who doesn't care is really the true friend. And indeed, this is further confirmation that any modern-day Lysias that loving women should be seen like drinking beer. So, our Phaedrus continues reciting the speech of Lysias. "But those who are non-lovers, and those whose success in love is the reward of their merit, will not be jealous of the companions of their beloved, and will rather hate those who refuse to be his associates, thinking that their favorite is slighted by the latter and the benefited by the former. For more love than hatred may be expected to come to him out of his friendship with others." Is Lysias actually arguing that polyamory, where cheating on your partner is normalized simply by trying to excuse the cheating, claiming that this evil is actually virtuous? Does the lack of shame about that conduct which should be shameful transform it into virtuous conduct? Does Lysias truly believe that this would abolish jealousy and fear of abandonment? Perhaps Lysias is also suggesting that homosexuals are more likely to have multiple partners than heterosexuals. Lysias in his speech next accuses true friends as needy because their love is genuine, comparing them to beggars, calling them empty souls. And he continues, "Further, if we ought to shower favors on those who are the most eager suitors, on that principle we ought always to do good, not to the most virtuous, but to the most needy, for they are the persons who will be the most relieved, and will therefore be the most grateful. And when you make a feast, you should invite not your friend, but the beggar and the empty soul, for they will love you and attend you, and come about your doors, and will be the best pleased, and the most grateful, and will invoke many a blessing on your head. This is very close to the parable of the great banquet in Matthew and Luke, where the king holds a wedding banquet, and many of the guests make excuses why they can't attend. And the scriptures say, "Then the householder in anger said to his servant, 'Go out quickly to the streets and the lanes of the city, and bring in the poor and the maimed and the blind and the lame.'" This is very close to the parable of the great banquet in Matthew and Luke, where the king holds a wedding banquet, and many of the guests make excuses why they can't attend. And the scriptures say, "Then the householder in anger said to his servant, 'Go out quickly to the streets and the lanes of the city, and bring in the poor and the maimed and the blind and the lame.'" Lysias' speech continues, but he is attributing virtue to the non-lover. "Yet surely you ought not to be granting favors to those who besiege you with prayer, but to those who are best able to reward you. Nor to the lover only, but to those who are worthy of love. Nor to those who will enjoy the bloom of your youth, but to those who will share your possessions with you in age. Nor to those who care about you for a moment only, but to those who will continue your friendship through life. Nor to those who, when their passion is over, will pick a quarrel with you, but rather to those who, when the charm of their youth has left you, will show their own virtue. Remember what I have said, and consider yet this further point. Friends admonish the lover under the idea that his way of life is bad, but no one of his kindred ever censured the non-lover." And the conclusion of this speech of Lysias read by Phaedrus includes a truth that seeks to confirm his prior falsehoods. Perhaps you will ask me whether I propose that you should indulge every non-lover, to which I reply that not even the lover would advise you to indulge all lovers, for the indiscriminate favor is less esteemed by the rational recipient, and less hidden by him who would escape the censure of the world. Now love ought to be for the advantage of both parties, and for the injury of neither. And Socrates then tries to improve the speech by Lysias. And Socrates and Phaedrus are conversing while sitting on the grass next to the stream. And Socrates wants to lead his student on the road of wisdom, so he's reluctant to say that Lysias is deceiving him with a speech that seems sweet but is instead predatory. So instead, he proposes to fix the weaknesses he sees in the speech. The primary fault is the speech talks about love but never defines what love is. Is Lysias mixing up lovers and non-lovers? And the secondary fault is the speech lacks organization. It is seemingly random thoughts just strung together. In other words, Socrates wants to improve on a flawed speech that describes a romantic or carnal love. But when he finishes, this second speech in the Phaedrus is simply an improved, fundamentally flawed speech, similar to the speeches made by the dinner guests in the Symposium. And the Phaedrus is the rare Platonic dialogue where Socrates offers up prayers to the gods. And he prays, "Come, O ye muses melodious, O help me in the tale which my good friend here desires me to rehearse, in order that his friend whom he always deemed wise may seem to him to be wiser than ever." And then symbolically, Socrates throws a cloak over his head while he gives this improved imperfect speech, which is a sign of shame. And when he's trying to improve on the speech of Lysias. Once upon a time there was a fair boy, or more properly speaking, a youth. He was very fair and had a great many lovers, and there was one especially cunning one, who had persuaded the youth that he did not love him, but he really loved him all the same. And one day when he was paying his addresses to him, he used this very argument, that he ought to accept the non-lover rather than the lover. Socrates is critical that Lysias does not offer a definition of love before he discusses the lover and non-lover, and we don't know what is the genuine lover for sure as a consequence. And he offers a definition of the flawed romantic carnal love. The irrational desire which overcomes the tendency of opinion towards right and is led away to the enjoyment of beauty, and especially of personal beauty, by the desires which are our own kindred. That supreme desire, I say, which by leading conquers and by force of passion is reinforced, from this very force receiving a name, is called love, an erotic love also known as eros. Thus, Socrates has Lysias stating that now love has been defined. Let us now inquire what advantage or disadvantage is likely to ensue from the lover or the non-lover to him who accepts their advances. Socrates has his Lysias describe the lover. He who is the victim of his passions and the slave of pleasure will of course desire to make his beloved as agreeable to himself as possible. Now to him who has a mind diseased, anything is agreeable which is not opposed to him. but that which is equal or superior is hateful to him, and therefore the lover will not brook any superiority or equality on the part of his beloved. He always seeks to reduce him to inferiority. Therefore he cannot help being jealous, and will debar his beloved from the advantages of society which make a man out of him, and especially from that society which would have given him wisdom, and thereby he cannot fail to do him great harm. That is to say, in his excessive fear, lest he should come to be despised in his eyes, he will be compelled to banish from him divine philosophy, and there is no greater injury which he can inflict upon him than this. He will contrive that his beloved shall be wholly ignorant, and in everything shall look to him. He is to be the delight of the lover's heart, and a curse to himself. Verily, a lover is a profitable guardian and associate for him in all that relates to his mind. And Socrates has Lysias criticizing the lover, and he is clearly describing pederasty, where an older man courts a teenage boy. But the lover is not only hurtful to his love, the much older lover to his teenage love, he is also an extremely disagreeable companion. The old proverbs say that birds of a feather flock together. I suppose that equality of years inclines them to the same pleasures, and similarity begets friendship. Yet you may have had more than enough of this, and verily constraint is always said to be grievous. Now the lover is not only unlike his beloved, but he forces himself upon him. For he is old and his love is young, and neither day nor night will he leave him if he can help. Necessity and the sting of desire drive him on, and allure him with the pleasure which he receives from seeing, hearing, touching, perceiving him in every way. And therefore he is delighted to fasten upon him and to minister to him. But what pleasure or consolation can the beloved, the young teenage boy, be receiving all this time? Must he not feel the extremity of disgust when he looks at an old shriveled face and the remainder to match, which even in a description is disagreeable, and quite detestable when he is forced into daily contact with his lover? Moreover, he is jealously watched and guarded against everything and everybody, and has to hear misplaced and exaggerated praises of himself, and censures equally inappropriate, which are intolerable when the man is sober, and besides being intolerable, are published all over the world in their indelicacy and wearisomeness when he is drunk. Socrates observes that many such unbalanced, potentially predatory relationships between older men and teenage boys don't always end well. Not only while his love continues is the older man mischievous and unpleasant, but when his love ceases, he becomes a perfidious enemy on him whom he showered his oaths and prayers and promises, and yet could hardly prevail upon him to tolerate the tedium of his company, even from motives of interest. And near the end of this improvised speech, Socrates realizes that Lysias is comparing the older pederast to a demented lover, inferior to a non-lover, when the older man was never a true lover at all, but was only interested in abusing his teenage beloved. Socrates has Lysias proclaiming, "So the teenage boy flees, not knowing that he ought never from the first to have accepted a demented lover instead of a sensible non-lover. And in making such a choice, he was giving himself up to a faithless, morose, envious, disagreeable being, hurtful to his estate, hurtful to his bodily health, and still more hurtful to the cultivation of his mind, than which there neither is nor ever will be anything more honored in the eyes both of gods and of men. Consider this, fair youth, and know that in the friendship of the lover there is no real kindness. He has an appetite and wants to feed upon you." And Socrates ends his speech with a horrid quote, "As wolves love lambs, so lovers love their loves." And Socrates changes his mind and does not wish to recraft the section where Lysias praises the non-lover. And Phaedrus objects, "I thought you were only halfway, and were going to make a similar speech about all the advantages of accepting the non-lover. Why do you not proceed?" And Socrates adds that he hesitates to praise the non-lover, regrets the ill-formed speech he cannot rescue, and only wishes to return home. And commentators see symbolism in this appeal by Phaedrus that Socrates remains and discusses further this topic of love. Phaedrus pleads, "Don't leave yet, Socrates, not until the heat of the day has passed. Do you not see that the hour is almost noon? There is the midday sun standing still, as people say, in the meridian. Let us rather stay and talk over what has been said, and then return in the cool." And then we have the final speech by Socrates on divine love. This is when the daimon of Socrates whispers in his ear that he must make amends. He must correct this false praise of a carnal love that is more manipulative and exploiting than romancing. This speech Socrates delivered, not veiled and ashamed as he was when he was trying to recast the irredeemable speech by Lysias, but with forehead bold and bare. And we reflect on Socrates' discussion on divine love in our next video. And after his discussion on divine love and immortality of the soul, Socrates transitions to the proper use of rhetoric, denying the belief by the sophists that rhetoric is a mere routine or trick, not an art. To put it bluntly, there never is nor never will be a real art of speaking which is divorced from the truth. Socrates follows this with a lengthy dialogue about rhetoric, how to be truthful, and that rhetoric must strive to understand that which it explains, and explain it in a logical manner, not intending to deceive or gaslight the listener with fancy words and misleading rhetorical devices. For not to know the nature of justice and injustice and good and evil, and not to be able to distinguish the dream from the reality, cannot in truth be otherwise than disgraceful to him, even though he has the applause of the whole world. Rhetoric should be based in principles of justice and goodness and nobility, taught and communicated orally for the sake of instruction, engraven in the soul. There should be clearness and perfection and seriousness in rhetoric and writing. Rarely does Socrates pray this in his dialogue, but he concludes by praying, "Beloved Pan and all ye other gods who haunt this place, give me beauty in the inward soul, and may the outward and inward man be at one. May I reckon the wise to be the wealthy, and may I have such a quantity of gold as a temperate man, and only he can bear and carry. Anything more? Prayer, I think, is enough for me." Now we'll discuss the sources we use for this video. Barnes & Noble has an excellent collection of the main Platonic Dialogues in the classical translation by Benjamin Jowett, and we found this translation also free on the internet in the Gutenberg site. We've also included insights we gained from the great courses lectures by the Platonic enthusiast, Professor Michael Segru. When listening to his lectures, you can understand how some in the ancient world came to view Socrates and Plato almost like they were religious philosophers. Professor Segru points out the symbolism in the dialogues. The discussion in the Phaedrus is held outside the city near a babbling brook near nature. There they discuss love in the presence of the gods. The YouTube description includes a link to our PowerPoint script that we uploaded to SlideShare and also our blog. Please support this channel by sharing this video with your friends and by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons and by clicking on the Amazon links to purchase any of the books we discussed, which will earn us a very small affiliate commission. And please consider becoming a patron of our channel. Plus, we will host special discussion groups for our patrons. Plus, you can click on the Meetup or small M icon to participate in our online discussions, where we practice our future YouTube scripts. And please click on the links for other videos that will broaden your knowledge and improve your soul.